I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In the name of God, Amen. We, whose names are underwritten, the loyal subjects of our dread sovereign Lord King James, by the grace of God, of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, King, Defender of the Faith, etc., having undertaken for the glory of God and advancement of the Christian faith, and the honor of our King and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia, do by these presents, solemnly and mutually, in the presence of God and one another, covenant and combine ourselves together into a civil body politic, for our better ordering and preservation, and furtherance of the ends aforesaid, and by virtue hereof do enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and officers, from time to time, as shall be thought most meet and convenient for the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience. In witness whereof we have hereunto subscribed our names at Cape Cod, the 11th of November, in the reign of our sovereign Lord King James, of England, France, and Ireland, the 18th, and of Scotland the 54th, Anno Domini, 1620.
The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I called to the Lord who is worthy of praise, and I have been saved from my enemies. The cords of death entangled me, the torrents of destruction overwhelmed me, the cords of the grave coiled around me, the snares of death confronted me. In my distress I called to the Lord. I cried to my God for help. From his temple he heard my voice. My cry came before him into his ears. The earth trembled and quaked, and the foundations of the mountains shook. They trembled because he was angry. Smoke rose from his nostrils. Consuming fire came from his mouth. Burning coals blazed out of it. He parted the heavens and came down. Dark clouds were under his feet. He mounted the cherubim and flew. He soared on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him. the dark rain clouds of the sky. Out of the brightness of his presence, clouds advanced with hailstones and bolts of lightning. The Lord thundered from heaven. The voice of the Most High resounded. He shot his arrows and scattered the enemy. With great bolts of lightning he routed them. The valleys of the sea were exposed, and the foundations of the earth laid bare at your rebuke, Lord, at the blast of breath from your nostrils. He reached down from on high and took hold of me. He drew me out of deep waters. He rescued me from my powerful enemy, from my foes who were too strong for me. They confronted me in the day of my disaster, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me.
In Congress, July 4, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such forms as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government.
I'm not trying to impress you. I'm just trying to impress upon you. I'm like you. I'm no better than you. You know, I'm a 960 SAT guy.
Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. And pray in the Spirit on all occasions, with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring towards him. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands.
I've served this country for 14 years in the Congress, and before that in the service. I have just as high a devotion, just as high an opinion. What I downgrade, Mr. Nixon, is the leadership the country's getting, not the country. Now, I didn't make most of the statements that you said I made. I believe the Soviet Union is first in outer space. We may have made more shots, but the size of their rocket thrust and all the rest. You yourself said to Khrushchev, you may be ahead of us in rocket thrust, but we're ahead of you in color television, in your famous discussion in the kitchen. I think that color television is not as important as rocket thrust. Secondly, I didn't say we had the worst slums in the world. I said we had too many slums, and that they are bad, and we ought to do something about them, and we ought to support housing legislation, which this administration has opposed. I didn't say we had the worst education in the world. What I said was that 10 years ago, we were producing twice as many scientists and engineers as the Soviet Union, and today they're producing twice as many as we are, and that this affects our security around the world. And fourth, I believe that the polls and other studies and votes in the United Nations and anyone reading the paper and any citizen of the United States must come to the conclusion that the United States no longer carries the same image of a vital society on the move with its brightest days ahead as it carried a decade or 2 decades ago. Part of that is because we've stood still here at home, because we haven't met our problems in the United States, because we haven't had a moving economy.
If we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. The sloping hills of Arlington National Cemetery, with its row upon row of simple white markers. Under one such marker lies a young man, Martin Treptow, who left his job in a small-town barber shop in 1917 to go to France with the famed Rainbow Division. There on the Western Front, he was killed trying to carry a message between battalions under heavy artillery fire. We're told that on his body was found a diary. On the flyleaf, under the heading, "My Pledge," he had written these words: "America must win this war. Therefore I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice. I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone. We must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. It is a weapon that we as Americans do have. Let that be understood by those who practice terrorism and prey upon their neighbors. As for the enemies of freedom, those who are potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not surrender for it now or ever. We are Americans.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeat in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
The Lord is with me. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? The Lord is with me. He is my helper. I look in triumph on my enemies. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in humans. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes. All the nations surrounded me, but in the name of the Lord I cut them down. They surrounded me on every side, but in the name of the Lord I cut them down. They swarmed around me like bees, but they were consumed as quickly as burning thorns. In the name of the Lord I cut them down. I was pushed back and about to fall, but the Lord helped me. The Lord is my strength and my defense. He has become my salvation.
The poorest way to face life is to face it with a sneer. There are many men who feel a kind of twisted pride and cynicism. There are many who confine themselves to criticism of the way others do what they themselves dare not even attempt. There is no more unhealthy being, no man less worthy of respect than he who either really holds or feigns to hold an attitude of sneering disbelief toward all that is great and lofty, whether in achievement or in that noble effort which, even if it fails, comes to second achievement. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again. Because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who, at the best, knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
Too many of us think it is impossible. Too many think it is unreal. But that is a dangerous, defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. We need not accept that view. Our problems are man-made, therefore they can be solved by man, and man can be as big as he wants. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable, and we believe they can do it again. Surely the opening vistas of space promise high costs and hardships, as well as high reward. So it is not surprising that some would have us stay where we are a little longer, to rest, to wait. But this city of Houston, this state of Texas, this country of the United States was not built by those who waited and rested and wished to look behind them. This country was conquered by those who move forward, and so will space. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In the name of God, Amen. We, whose names are underwritten, the loyal subjects of our dread sovereign Lord King James, by the grace of God, of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, King, Defender of the Faith, etc., having undertaken for the glory of God and advancement of the Christian faith, and the honor of our King and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia, do by these presents, solemnly and mutually, in the presence of God and one another, covenant and combine ourselves together into a civil body politic, for our better ordering and preservation, and furtherance of the ends aforesaid, and by virtue hereof do enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and officers, from time to time, as shall be thought most meet and convenient for the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience. In witness whereof we have hereunto subscribed our names at Cape Cod, the 11th of November, in the reign of our sovereign Lord King James, of England, France, and Ireland, the 18th, and of Scotland the 54th, Anno Domini, 1620.
The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I called to the Lord who is worthy of praise, and I have been saved from my enemies. The cords of death entangled me, the torrents of destruction overwhelmed me, the cords of the grave coiled around me, the snares of death confronted me. In my distress I called to the Lord. I cried to my God for help. From his temple he heard my voice. My cry came before him into his ears. The earth trembled and quaked, and the foundations of the mountains shook. They trembled because he was angry. Smoke rose from his nostrils. Consuming fire came from his mouth. Burning coals blazed out of it. He parted the heavens and came down. Dark clouds were under his feet. He mounted the cherubim and flew. He soared on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him, the dark rain clouds of the sky. Out of the brightness of his presence, clouds advanced with hailstones and bolts of lightning. The Lord thundered from heaven. The voice of the Most High resounded. He shot his arrows and scattered the enemy. With great bolts of lightning he routed them. The valleys of the sea were exposed, and the foundations of the earth laid bare at your rebuke, Lord, at the blast of breath from your nostrils. He reached down from on high and took hold of me. He drew me out of deep waters. He rescued me from my powerful enemy, from my foes who were too strong for me. They confronted me in the day of my disaster, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me.
In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident. that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such forms as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government.
I'm not trying to impress you. I'm just trying to impress upon you. I'm like you. I'm no better than you. You know, I'm a 960 SAT guy.
Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. And pray in the Spirit on all occasions, with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring towards him. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands,
I've served this country for 14 years in the Congress and before that in the service. I have just as high a devotion, just as high an opinion. What I downgrade, Mr. Nixon, is the leadership the country's getting, not the country. Now, I didn't make most of the statements that you said I made. I believe the Soviet Union is first in outer space. We may have made more shots, but the size of their rocket thrust and all the rest. You yourself said to Khrushchev, you may be ahead of us in rocket thrust, but we're ahead of you in color television, in your famous discussion in the kitchen. I think that color television is not as important as rocket thrust. Secondly, I didn't say we had the worst slums in the world. I said we had too many slums, and that they are bad, and we ought to do something about them, and we ought to support housing legislation, which this administration has opposed. I didn't say we had the worst education in the world. What I said was that 10 years ago, we were producing twice as many scientists and engineers as the Soviet Union, and today they're producing twice as many as we are, and that this affects our security around the world. And fourth, I believe that the polls and other studies and votes in the United Nations and anyone reading the paper and any citizen of the United States must come to the conclusion that the United States no longer carries the same image of a vital society on the move with its brightest days ahead as it carried a decade or 2 decades ago. Part of that is because we've stood still here at home, because we haven't met our problems in the United States, because we haven't had a moving economy.
If we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. The sloping hills of Arlington National Cemetery, with its row upon row of simple white markers. Under one such marker lies a young man, Martin Treptow, who left his job in a small-town barber shop in 1917 to go to France with the famed Rainbow Division. There on the Western Front, he was killed trying to carry a message between battalions under heavy artillery fire. We're told that on his body was found a diary. On the flyleaf, under the heading, My Pledge, he had written these words: America must win this war. Therefore I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone. We must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. It is a weapon that we as Americans do have. Let that be understood by those who practice terrorism and prey upon their neighbors. As for the enemies of freedom, those who are potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not
midnight. here to do whatever I can, be it early morning, late afternoon, or at midnight. Oh, it's never too soon. Don't wanna take you, don't wanna hold you. I wanna give my all to you, and I want you to completely understand. Oh, where I'm at, oh, and where I am, oh yeah. I'm your boogeyman, I'm your boogeyman, turn me on. I'm your boogeyman, I'm your boogeyman, do what you want. I'm your boogeyman, I'm your boogeyman, turn me on. I'm your boogeyman, I'm your boogeyman, do what you want. I'm your boogeyman, that's what I am. I'm here to do whatever I can, be it early morning, late afternoon, or at midnight. Oh, it's never too soon. I wanna be with you, I wanna be with you. Yeah, we'll be together, you and me. I wanna see you, or I get near you. I wanna love you up from some down to love. Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to American Advocates. This should be episode 197, coming to you guys live on August 24th, 2026. Technically August 25th now, but we're going to say August 24th for the purposes of being able to look back on this stream should I need to and know what date I was predominantly discussing the news for. I'm late, of course, tonight, and I had a hard time gathering my thoughts. That's why I had such a long pre-show run there, because I was just trying to organize all of my collective thoughts about the news that's going on lately today regarding Scott Bessent and his announcement of Operation Economic Outcast, I believe it's called. There's a lot to go over. There's a lot to understand. There's a lot of complexities in all of this. And I was trying to sit here and organize it, and then it got to a point where I said, you know what, fuck it. I'm just going to go live right now, kind of halfway wing this, halfway prep it, and see where we go from here. Because boy, oh boy, is there a lot going on. We are now in day 177 of this Iran war. 177 days in the Middle East. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. Actually, of course, I can believe it. Of course, I predicted from the start that this war would go on way longer than the 4 to 6 week time frame we were originally given. And here we are, 177 days in, still no end in sight. That 6 week mark is coming, or sorry, 6 month mark. Not 6 weeks like we were told, 6 months. No end in sight, and more news, more of the latest developments being announced today that, again, just suggest that this war could go on for quite a while longer. The war continues to lose popularity with Americans, and there's still no end in sight, and there's not even really an effort to end it now. It just keeps going. Not only is it losing popularity with Americans in general, but even with Republicans. Support for this war has now dropped 8 points since the month of March. I want to show you guys this right here. I have this one pulled up. Make sure I got it clicked up for both the vertical right here. You can see what's happening right here. Support for U.S. military action against Iran was already low back in March of this year at just 37%. Now you fast forward to what is the end of August now, and it's at just 31%. What we're seeing is, even with Republicans, their backing and overall support for this war has dropped from what started at 77%, and it's now down to 69%. And this is significant because now what we're seeing is, even with Trump's base, even with the Republicans, with some of MAGA for that matter, we are beginning to see that not only are they losing interest, not only is MAGA losing interest, the Republicans losing interest in the Iran war, but they're getting fatigued by it and souring on it even. In addition to all of that, 83% of Americans as of right now believe that this war will continue for an extended period of time. And the latest phase of the war basically has been launched today. And that leads me to what we're really going to get into today and what I've already made videos describing basically, or analyzing and making, predictions off of. And that is Scott Bessent's announcement. Because now we are entering what seems to be this new stretch of the Iran war. Make no mistake about it. This Iran war is in its end game, as I've been explaining multiple times here on this channel. We're in the end game of this war. I've also warned, of course, every time I've said that the end game in the Middle East doesn't mean that the war is coming to an end anytime soon. It doesn't mean that it's all over with. It just means the war, the result, the outcome of the war has already been decided. One side is going to be very clearly victorious. The other side is very, very clearly going to take an L. And unfortunately, the historical precedent in this Middle East region is that these empires that go to wage war in these regions always wind up doing so to their detriment. They wind up losing inevitably, and then failing to admit or recognize that loss, they go all in even further, which is why I've always likened the Middle East region to that of quicksand, because seemingly every empire, most countries that try this shit in the Middle East wind up not only losing, but unwilling to recognize the loss. They go in deeper and they sink in deeper, and then the empire crumbles. So we're in this phase now, in this end game of the Iran war, and it's entering a new stretch born out of the unwillingness of the United States to recognize what kind of circumstance it's currently in. And so now we're seeing economic warfare, the latest test run of the Trump administration in the Middle East, with this whole Operation Economic, what did they call it again? Operation Economic Outcast. That's what it's called. We're seeing this now as the latest seemingly test run being presented by the Trump administration. Can't get the result you want in the Middle East? Don't worry about it. It looks like it's going to wind up being an economic warfare, and it's sort of like the perfect circumstance to basically justify continuing this further and further beyond where it should go. So we're going to break that down tonight. Be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Double tap your phone screens. Hit the thumbs up button. It's free to do, and it does encourage YouTube's algorithm to push this show out to more people who need to see this kind of content, this kind of truth. Also, of course, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on post notifications so you're notified every single time I go live, which is most nights of the week. It's looking like the algorithm is not going to be kind to me tonight, so I could use your guys' support. Double tap those phone screens, hit the thumbs up button. It's free, and it does tremendously help the channel. Getting on with the story, Scott Bessent wound up announcing the plans, detailing the plans today for Economic D-Day, what President Donald Trump has been hinting at now for, truthfully over a week when it comes to Iran. It's now being referred to as, like I said, Operation Economic Outcast, and this is essentially what Scott Bessent had to say in the announcement of all of this. Take a listen to this.
It is no longer acceptable to operate in the gray spaces of this conflict. Countries cannot claim they are blind to enabling this activity. Iran's enablers purchase, transport its petroleum. They facilitate the flow of its finances through exchange houses and free trade zones. They welcome Iran's flights and maintain registries on its behalf. They turn a blind eye to seaborne fuel transfers and overland transits. They condone illicit use of their banks, all the while concealing the extent of their complicity. The president is making phone calls to world leaders with specific requests to cease their interactions with the regime. We are already seeing results. Over the weekend, comments from Iranian leadership clearly acknowledged the effect of this campaign, and nations that facilitate any interactions with the regime should quickly heed our message. Those who stand with the United States will reap the rewards of our partnership. Those who tether themselves to the Iranian regime should expect to share in the isolation of a withering regime.
So a lot was said there. Now he wound up going on to break down the plans of the sanctions, and they're now looking into sanctioning everything from gold to anything else you can imagine. There's 5 different succinct categories of these sanctions: gold, oil, of course, and other material goods that are on cargo ships in the Middle East, purchased by Iran, sold by Iran, what have you. Why I played that clip particularly, though, is because it really does get into the complexities of the problems that the United States is going to be facing in trying to impose these sanctions. What I've warned about on this channel when it comes to the leverage of all of the nations involved, what it means to actually try to impose these sanctions on Iran, and how China is going to be a big hindrance to that, what I predicted has ultimately already shown itself to be coming to pass. I was completely accurate in saying that China would be a massive problem in all of this and would not play along. And if you remember correctly, actually, I pointed that out as the biggest problem first and foremost to the United States attempting to go this new sanctioned, it's not even new, this sanctioned route with Iran once again. If you'll recall, actually, I wound up saying this is how this works. China is the largest customer to Iran. And I pointed out that in the past, this was sort of the notion that many people are familiar with. Most people are familiar and they understand this sort of dynamic globally between China and Iran, and they understand that China purchases so much of this Iranian oil. 80 to 90% of Iranian oil is exported to China, purchased by China, and so. With this understanding, you've heard this misnomer from people, from MAGA cultists particularly, who will tell you that Trump is playing 5D chess against China. It's just not true. China is not only not suffering from this, but they're poised to actually benefit tremendously as a result of it. And what we're seeing is this dynamic play out here where President Donald Trump has gotten himself involved in this war that is a foolish war. It's an unwinnable war. Nothing is going well for the United States in the Middle East. We have achieved none of our goals in the region, and we have spent a fortune trying to. Iran is no less of a nuclear threat than they were at the start of this war, if they were ever a nuclear threat to begin with. Iran has plenty of ballistic missiles, and the factories in which they produce them have not been destroyed or eradicated. Iran closed down the Strait of Hormuz, which was not closed prior to this war, and became an added-on problem that apparently was somehow unforeseen by the Trump administration before starting the war, and now has become the actual sole focus in the Middle East. The war has transformed from a war of destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities and regime change the fuck out of them, to now we must reopen the Strait of Hormuz that Iran closed because we bombed them and started a war with them, and before that the strait was opened. It is absolute madness. And we are blowing through high-grade munitions, which are expensive and take forever to reproduce, and we have depleted our defensive capabilities severely so, to the point of where U.S. military forces are reporting that they have to now actively choose to let some of Iran's ballistic missile strikes hit targets or fly in and at least hit anywhere near the target, rather than actively shooting them down, because we are running painfully low when it comes to Patriot interceptor missiles, for instance. The problem in all of this, and why I bring this up again, we are dependent on rare earths and rare earth minerals, rare earth magnets, to be able to create and produce and then subsequently or therefore restock much of what we have burned through when it comes to high-grade munitions and defensive capabilities. And the problem with that is, though America is a land filled with rare earth minerals, it's not like we're short on those. We do not have the processing capabilities to actually utilize them. America, for some inexplicable reason over the last 25 years, despite starting all of these stupid Middle East wars where you're literally dependent on these more, decided not to go all in on the processing of rare earth minerals, and decided to cuck ourselves to China like we were doing with everything else production and manufacturing wise throughout the 90s and even late 80s. That includes rare earth minerals, and now we find ourselves in 2026, and the world finds themselves in 2026, in a position where China is responsible for 94% of the world's rare earth mineral processing. And we need that in order to replenish all of the munitions we're burning through. So if you come to this complete understanding, what I broke down on the last episode regarding this whole sanction warfare against Iran, just recognize what that means. And to break it down simply for you, we attempt to impose sanctions on Iran's oil predominantly and other resources. That Scott Bessent talked about gold and a whole slew of categories today. But oil is the main one. It just is. China buys 90% of Iran's oil, at least 80% from what I'm seeing. 80 to 90%, largest customer of Iran by far. Our sanctions will then possibly hurt China. And as I explained in prior episodes, China strategically timed them pulling themselves off the global oil markets intentionally at the start of this war. China has been incredibly brilliant over the last several decades, several years, going in and basically accumulating all of this much cheaper than market price oil and stockpiling it and putting it into what is the world's largest private oil reserves. And the reason why they've been doing this is for a situation like this. Understanding, like Iran and so many other countries have, that this war was just inevitably going to happen because the United States is cucked to Zionist interests, and people like Benjamin Netanyahu have been pushing for this war with Iran by the United States for the better part of 3 decades. The writing has been on the wall for a lot of countries in the region, and since China is essentially almost dependent on Iran for oil, they understood that a future war between the United States and Iran would lead to this. Somehow Trump's own administrative officials didn't seem to grasp that the Strait of Hormuz would be closed and that the global oil markets would be affected, but China and all the other countries in the region certainly did. So China has been beefing up and preparing for this with the world's largest private oil reserves that they have access to. It's theirs. And they've been waiting for this moment to do what they ultimately did. And while MAGA cultists were, of course, and by MAGA cultist, I am a conservative, mind you, but by MAGA cultist, I mean the uninformed and the Trump sycophants who at this point still support him without questioning any of it. They were the ones celebrating the fact that the oil futures markets were not reacting as in volatile of a fashion as you'd expect. Because some people were sort of accurately stating that this could cause the price of oil per barrel to shoot up to $200. That hasn't happened yet and never wound up happening. And it's the MAGA cultists that will go online and they'll say, see, Trump is a genius. You shouldn't be a panicking. The reason why, and I'll say this every time because people need to hear this, the reason why that didn't happen is because China, one of the largest consumers and customers of oil globally, took themselves off the global oil markets at the start of this war to lean on their largest private oil reserves in existence that any country has access to. And they did this because over the course of the last several years, however long, they've been slowly building those oil reserves and filling them up with cheaper than market value oil from countries actually. China was involved in Venezuela for a reason. That's why I was in favor of the Venezuelan operation by Trump, actually. That's an example of good foreign policy, and it needed to happen, and I'm grateful that it did. Iran is an example of bad foreign policy, the worst kind of foreign policy. But the reason why, and I explained this in greater detail last episode, I won't do it again for the sake of time and not being redundant. China, the reason why they've been preparing for this and did what they did is because China has been, since the year 2020, they've been going through their version of a 2008 housing market crisis. Our housing market crisis. And China was going through that deliberately to basically reset their economy and what it's stimulated by and how it functions. China is seeking to escape the real estate debt model of their economy and what it was built off of and move towards more of a production and manufacturing type economy. So they've deliberately allowed for the collapse of their real estate markets by intentionally deflating it and refusing to bail out large real estate companies that are going under as a result of it. They're no longer interested in that model, economically speaking. They're interested in production and manufacturing because of the AI boom. China is willing to use robots to replace their workers largely, and they're developing and leading the way in many ways in robotics and AI development. And they will be using that in their factories and their manufacturing sectors to beef up their production, banking on becoming the country in the future that the entire world relies on for making their goods. We, the United States, in the 80s and 90s especially, were sort of the catalyst for that. We were the jumpstart to China identifying this as the future. And now AI is here in the form of a fourth industrial revolution that will make that possible for China to really go all in on it, which is what they're doing. But as a result, their economy is incredibly soft right now and vulnerable. So high-priced oil as a result of this Iran war doesn't serve their interests, which is why they took themselves off the oil markets as a customer. And that's why the oil markets didn't respond in such a volatile manner like some were predicting, not because of anything Trump did, but because demand didn't skyrocket or stay as high as a result of one of the largest customers globally of it taking themselves off the market and wisely dipping into their oil reserves that has been built up over the years through their accumulating cheaper, already below market value priced oil. That's what China's been doing. They're now ready to come back on the market, and they've been coming back on, which will be quite the shock to the oil markets. So get ready for that first and foremost. But then secondly, also understand that as a result of that, and as a result of the culmination of them looking to buy oil globally again and leaning on Iran heavily to do so, Iran sells 80 to 90% of their oil goes to China. Well, China will now be, in their own interest, seeking to maximize all of their relationship with Iran and keep them safe in some ways. So the sanctions now, they actually do threaten China potentially. However, all of this was to lead up to what I was reminding everybody. We have burned through these munitions and our defensive capabilities, and my other prior episode went into the details of that. We need the rare earth magnets and minerals that China is responsible for 94% of the world's processing of, including America. So the leverage is just not there for President Donald Trump to weaponize these sanctions, or for Scott Bessent even. So with that in mind, China has now already publicly stated they're not going to recognize the sanctions. Over in China, they have created literal laws that prohibit their companies from abiding by U.S. sanctions and punishes the companies strictly with fines, I believe, massive fines. So essentially, any Chinese company that imposes or enforces U.S. sanctions not only pays more money technically by doing so, but then gets fined by the Chinese government in addition to it for abiding by U.S. sanctions. So China has said no to the U.S. sanctions. This is part of the problem. This is what I warned about on this channel, and that's despite that. You would think the Trump administration doesn't watch American advocates. I mean, I'm putting out the information for free. You would think that they don't watch it for some reason. They should be watching this channel. And so should you. You should subscribe right now and like the stream. Double tap your phone screens. Hit the thumbs up button. It's free to do. And it encourages YouTube's algorithm to push the show out to more people who need to see this. So that was what I had mentioned. And now what we're seeing with Scott Bessent in that first clip I played there is essentially him admitting that there is a massive chink in the armor. Because let's go back to it. Again, this is what he had to say here. Just take a listen to how he breaks this down, this news. I'm going to play it for you guys once again.
Leakage approach, there will be no minimal breathing space for the regime to rebuild its capacity to inflict terror against America and the world. The final refuge of this regime is the mistaken conclusion of nations that still finance the Iranian threat in the hopes of evading it. It is no longer acceptable to operate in the gray spaces of this conflict. Countries cannot claim they are blind to enabling this activity. Iran's enablers purchase, transport its petroleum. They facilitate the flow of its finances through exchange houses and free trade zones. They welcome Iran's flights and maintain registries on its behalf. They turn a blind eye to seaborne fuel transfers and overland transits. They condone illicit use of their banks, all the while concealing the extent of their complicity. The president is making phone calls to world leaders with specific requests to cease their interactions with the regime.
Okay, so now if you're understanding after my breakdown of all of this what that is Scott Bessent openly acknowledging all of the loopholes essentially to the United States sanctions, which to me actually defies all logic to do in some ways. This is supposed to be economic D-Day, according to the Trump administration. This is supposed to be the shiver me timbers moment for Iran, where they're quaking in their boots about economic D-Day. Operation Economic Outcast, they're calling it. This is supposed to be the line in the sand, the moment that we crush Iran's economy. And Scott Bessent clearly he laid out a plan before this and goes on to do so more. I'm going to play a second clip in a second. But right here in the middle of it is what I wanted to highlight, because it is an acknowledgement by our own Treasury Secretary that they have a black market now literally set up for U.S. sanctions. And if that's the case, then just understand that the sanctions are not going to be punching with the full weight intended behind them. Now, Scott Bessent would also go on to say this right here.
Of those institutions targeted here, is that something that is coming in this campaign, or is the very delicate trade truce with China something that could prohibit you from going that far and taking that very big step?
We want to make clear here today that no one is above the reach of U.S. sanctions. That if they facilitate transactions and are part of the ecosystem that turns Iranian oil into money, into repression, they will be targeted. We find that the best way to engage with countries is through quiet diplomacy, and we are level setting with every country to tell them our expectations. We know who they are, they know who they are, so when the hammer of U.S. Treasury actions falls upon them, they will have no one to blame but themselves.
So they're calling it out. Scott Bessent goes on to call this out and essentially just, again, acknowledge the fact that all of these countries, or many of them in the Indo-Pacific, or especially in the Middle East, have developed these entire systems, these black markets, to bypass U.S. sanctions. And he's calling out the fact that they are recognizing that China doesn't seem really all that keen on playing nice and abiding by the U.S. sanctions and enforcing them on Iran. So he says they won't be spared. But as I just spent the last 10 minutes breaking down for everybody here, there's a massive issue with that. We don't have that kind of leverage over China, not in actuality. They provide and produce way too much for us, and we are way too dependent on China for us to be able to then weaponize and threaten with, secondary sanctions, which in many ways is essentially what Scott Bessent's speech was about today. We already knew the sanctions were coming. In fact, we've been sanctioning Iran, truthfully, since around November 1979. We've been sanctioning them for almost 50 years. This is nothing new when it comes to Iran or many Middle Eastern countries. These sanctions are literally not new. So the sanctions are not all that surprising. Neither are secondary sanctions for that matter. But when you really listen to the speech, what Scott Bessent's speech really is about the anticipation of none of these countries taking the sanctions seriously, and therefore he goes up there and essentially threatens secondary sanctions on all of the countries that won't listen. So the speech itself is self-defeating. It's essentially a speech of, well, we want to wage economic warfare against Iran now, since we clearly recognize militarily we can't stop them from doing what they're doing, and we can't defeat them. Boots on the ground is political poison. We can't just nuke them because that'll turn the United States into a global pariah. So now we're going to go eat the economic route. It's what Scott Bessent was brought into the Trump administration to do. And if you've ever read about the history and backstory of Scott Bessent, then you understand he actually is, on paper, good at this job for the most part. This idea is just idiotic, however. And I don't know if Scott Bessent will be able to turn chicken shit into a chicken sandwich. But that's essentially sort of the job that he's been given. And his speech reads as that. It's basically, these sanctions, we know they're not going to work because other countries won't abide by them and enforce them on Iran. So we'll be basically enforcing secondary sanctions on the countries who are too rebellious to abide by them. It's a self-defeating speech then, basically. That's my gripe with it. Now, here's the other problem. And there's multiple problems with this that I wanted to go over here. First of all, I'm going to get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of the black markets, the bypasses and all of this, to explain why these sanctions won't work further than I've already have in prior episodes. Again, you should like the stream right now, double tap your phone screen to hit the thumbs up button. You won't get a better analysis anywhere else on YouTube. Subscribe, of course, for more content like this too, because I have talked about this already and predicted we would wind up in this position, and here we are. And I'm feeling more and more vindicated after listening to Scott Bessent's speech. So the black market's a problem. Here's another problem that I want to address right off the bat. Iran is not Cuba. And this really is what came to mind throughout all of this. What we're doing with Cuba is a lot different than what we are capable of doing with Iran. We can sanction Cuba and cut them off from the rest of the world. Unlike with Iran. Iran isn't just some tiny little island that we can surround with a navy, literally, to prevent any trade or anything happening and then sanction them into oblivion while we sit there meticulously and watch their economy crumble and erode, which would lead to revolts in the streets and regime change and new leadership that's soft and malleable, that's willing to finally cooperate. In a perfect world, that's what Israel wants to happen to Iran, and they're trying to use us as their Shabbos Goy to accomplish that. But Iran is a massive nation filled with over 90 million people, a large military. It's defended on three sides by mountains. It's impervious to being breached, basically, for that reason. They're being funded by multiple countries that are essentially their neighbors, like China and Russia, and they're not an island, so we can't surround them. We can't cut them off from the rest of the world. If we shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which we have sort of done, but they've done it too, they have the Caspian Sea to their north. And it's not a perfect answer, and it's nowhere near a perfect answer. It's not actually even enough to make up for the Strait of Hormuz traffic, but it's a bypass that's being used. They have railroads that they've built across their country, some of which lead to the Caspian Sea for this purpose as well. And every time the United States has tried to stop that by blowing up part of the railway, China or Russia, I believe it's China though, they literally come down and repair it. They've been helping sustain Iran throughout this war, the same way the United States has been helping Ukraine sustain its war against Russia. Ukraine has no hope of winning, but Ukraine is being used as a proxy by the United States to wage war against Russia. Iran is now being used as a proxy by China and Russia to some degree. You can understand why Russia would be bitter with the United States right now with the Ukraine thing. So China and Russia are using Iran as a country that is powerful enough to not be able to be defeated quickly by America, but probably not powerful enough in the long run to be able to sustain any war against America's might without the backing of other countries. And that's what China and Russia are doing. They're using Iran as their proxy against America the way we use Ukraine as our proxy against Russia. The Caspian Sea helps them out in this effort, the railways, etc., like I said, and it's too large of a nation. So because we can't do that, we can't choke them off from the world like we can with Cuba, the sanctions can be bypassed because the black markets and the bypasses have already been set up. And like I said, we've been sanctioning Iran since November of 1979 to varying degrees, and Iran has never broke as a result of these sanctions. Their resolve remains intact. They have never broke. We have never been able to get the result out of them that we want. We've been sanctioning them since 1979, and our politicians will go on to say Iran's the number one funder of terrorism. Well, how are they funding terrorism for 50 years if they've been sanctioned for 50 years? It's because the sanctions don't work as well as we need them to. How has Iran's GDP grown despite the fact that we've been sanctioning them? Over the last 10 years, it's grown by 50%. But we've been sanctioning them into oblivion since 2015. all of this is what's happening right now. The sanctions have not been a proven success. They've actually been a largely proven failure. But moreover, and really what is important for everybody to understand here is not only is Iran not Cuba, not only can we not just cut them off from the world, and not only can we not just cut them off from the world, but we can't even stop them from bypassing our sanctions. But this is what BRICS was literally formed for moments like these. BRICS exists as a coalition of nations, an alliance. You know, Russia, Iran, China, they're some of the 3 founding members. They exist deliberately to undermine our US dollar and the global reserve currency because of these sanctions and because of us weaponizing our global reserve currency against every country that displeases us. After going around and convincing all of these countries to be on our US dollar and use it as the global reserve currency, truthfully, the only thing America needed to do after that was take a step back and purely profit off of it. Adopt the Monroe Doctrine, focus on the Western Hemisphere, and use all of the money that's coming in as a result of our dollar being the global reserve currency. Just prosper. That's all we have to do. But we can't help ourselves. We go in and we get involved and we search for monsters abroad in pursuit of slaying them, against the warnings of many of our founding fathers. And this, of course, pisses off a lot of these nations who have been sold on the idea of embracing our US dollar as the global currency, only to then find it be weaponized against them as a result every time they do something we don't like. So BRICS has been formed to undermine this slowly. And ultimately their goal is to overcome it and to conquer this. And every time the US decides to weaponize its currency as punishment, it strengthens the resolve of BRICS, as well as acts as an incentive for even more nations to take notice of all of this and ultimately decide that maybe they too should start getting involved with BRICS or looking at alternative forms of global currency in the future or ways to bypass the US dollar if needed. This doesn't do us any favors. It literally makes us even more an enemy to the rest of the world that is all dependent on our US dollar. That's one of the major problems of this. Not only do the sanctions not work, not only can we not really enforce them, but every time we even try this, it just de-incentivizes nations to stick to our US dollar. And they can't rapidly get off the US dollar system, so that's part of this too. It's not like they can just snap their fingers tomorrow and decide they're not going to use the US dollar. There's just not enough of a volume on the market or size or market set up properly for other countries to step in. There's no backup currency for that. People would point to the yuan, but you have to understand the yuan pales in comparison to the US dollar still. So they can't just immediately switch. But this keeps the fire going. It stokes the flames of the desire for that, and the moves continue to be made. They're playing a long game that most people are strategically too inept to be able to see. Thankfully, here on this channel, that's not the case. That's why you're here. That's why you should double tap your phone screens, hit the thumbs up button, and like the stream. You won't hear any information put out anywhere near like this on any other channel. And it does help encourage YouTube's algorithm to push the show out to more people who need to see this. Now, we already know that China will not recognize these sanctions. I predicted they wouldn't. They came out publicly, and I announced that on the last episode I went live on over the weekend. They made their public statement. They don't recognize it. And that's going to cut down the effectiveness of the sanctions drastically. If China, buying 90% of Iran's oil, says, actually, no, we won't abide by those sanctions, then Iran gets to sell their oil to China for a better price, essentially. Now, China is no saint, and this is what you have to understand as well. China will take advantage still of the fact that Iran is sanctioned. I believe China will still approach Iran and say, listen, you're very lucky that we're buying so much of your oil despite these sanctions, which we're now going to be facing a problem with. So you're going to sell us this oil at a cheaper price. And Iran will essentially be forced to do that because both these countries are sort of dependent on each other. China needs the oil. Iran's economy right now being choked off in the Strait of Hormuz by the Trump blockade and being battered by this entire Iran war is not walking away unscathed from this. So their economy is also dependent on the sale of oil. So they kind of need each other. But in this case right now, I would say Iran needs China way more than China needs Iran. And with that imbalance, China, despite being allied with Iran, will definitely still take advantage of them. We actually saw this model with China and Venezuela, which is again why I was so happy with the Venezuelan operation. Because China enslaved Venezuela in their classic debt trap, and then went to Venezuela and said, you're going to sell us your oil for a very cheap price now, since you're sanctioned by the U.S. and nobody else would buy your shit anyway. Your disgusting sour crude. We'll buy it, but way cheaper. And that's how China works. So that's essentially what's going to happen, but it doesn't. The fact that the transaction will still occur, the fact that Iran will still sell the oil to China and China will refuse to acknowledge or abide by the U.S. sanctions, already cuts down the effectiveness of the U.S. sanctions by 40 or 50 or 60% of the intended actual punch behind them. Now, Scott Bessent, of course, threatened to cut any countries off that decide to help Iran despite the sanctions by removing, essentially, them from having access to what is called SWIFT, S-W-I-F-T, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications. And this is essentially a secure messaging network that banks use to send payment instructions to countries that are doing business with the U.S. dollar. And when the United States decides to cut a country off from using SWIFT, it's essentially a combination of, taking away PayPal, but deeper than that, it's almost the equivalent of trying to debank somebody. If you can imagine being an American being debanked all of a sudden, you can fathom to some degree how much of a nightmare that would be. How much of a nightmare that would be for you. All of a sudden, you don't have access to money that's sitting in your account. All of a sudden, you can't even really use that money. Everything's digital nowadays. Do you have cash on hand? Probably not. And even if you did, where are you going to store it? What are you going to do with it? And when you use it all up, what do you do then? Do you have direct deposit from your job? If so, that's going right into your bank account. Well, you've been debanked. You can't use Google Pay anymore. You can't do any of that. Google Pay sends a message, sort of, right? Sort of. It's not the perfect analogy, but it's sort of one that helps people comprehend what this means. And SWIFT was set up by the United States for this reason, and we utilize it. And this is essentially what happens. This is how the United States tries to impose these sanctions. Countries that don't abide by it risk being kicked out of SWIFT, which handles the US dollar and sends the payment instructions. It's the banking method, essentially. So cutting a country off of this really just basically cuts them off from the US dollar in general. And that is a very clear threat that Scott Bessent made today when it came to countries like China, I guess. We'll see. But countries that refuse to abide and continue to support Iran by buying or purchasing their goods and oil. Here's the problem. The black markets, the bypass, and what Scott Bessent, like I said, it openly acknowledges in his speech that basically reads as a self-defeating speech, if you really know what to look for and understand. Because we kick these countries off from being able to use SWIFT, and that's where some of the black markets come in. That's where Hawala, it's called, comes in. Now, Hawala is an ancient informal, keyword, value transfer system, and it's been around for centuries. I actually was doing research on this today. Let me see, I didn't have it fully prepared or pulled up here. But you can actually Google this for yourself. You should read about it. Everybody should study up on this stuff. Let me zoom into, I know the vertical stream probably can't see it as good. Yeah, I'll leave it right about there. Hawala, from Wikipedia, it says, for illegal use of Hawala from the community in the Persian Gulf states. Hawala. Here you go. It's a popular and informal value transfer system based on the performance and honor of a huge network of money brokers known as hawaldars. They operate outside of parallel to traditional banking, financial channels, and remittance systems. The system requires a minimum of 2 hawaldars and take care of the transaction without the movement of cash or telegraphic transfer. While hawaldars are spread throughout the world, they are primarily located in West Asia, North Africa, the Horn of Africa, and the Indian subcontinent. Hawala usually follows Islamic traditions, but its use is not limited to Muslims. Now, the Hawala system actually originated in India, which is why it's predominantly in that country of India, but its uses are all across the Muslim nations. And essentially, if you're not fully understanding what Hawala does, first of all, it's a system that's been around since the 1300s, according to the research I did. 1300s, ancient system. And it's so old that it's actually still built on the trust and honor system. Handshakes, reputations, essentially. It relies on personal relationships, which is why it's two Hawaldars in Wikipedia. Two Hawaldars, those are witnesses, essentially. It's to double down on the ethics, on the eyewitness accounts. It's to keep everything ethical. And so it relies on personal relationships and, more importantly, actual personal good reputation. The reputation of the Hawaldars and of the people engaging with them is fundamental. Not just anybody can be a part of this. You actually have to be a person in good moral standing with a good reputation who's built a personal relationship inside of this system. And the way that it works is cash is essentially given to a broker in one country. We could use Dubai as an example of this. Cash would be given to a broker who's in Dubai, and from there, that broker would call their partner in Iran, who then would pay out the equivalent amount of cash given to the broker in Dubai. But the cash that was given to the broker in Dubai never crosses borders. It never crosses Dubai into Iran, for instance. It's a phone call that's made, and there's Hawaldars involved, and it's an honor system. And so because it never crosses borders, it sort of operates as a black market. It becomes harder to track down and trace, almost impossible, really. And that's how this works. The broker in Dubai basically takes the cash and then uses it to buy goods or services that Iran would need in this example, food or medicine or parts, etc. And from there, the partner in Iran then pays the local supplies with the Iranian currency, bypassing the banks and subsequently then the sanctions, SWIFT, etc. You don't need SWIFT if you're going to just not go across the border with these payments and use a black market method. So that's the problem. And Scott Bessent doesn't just openly, go into detail on this, but that's one of the things that he's mentioning, cash storehouses and etc. He's mentioning the black market and openly admitting in doing so to people, though most don't understand this, he's openly admitting essentially, like I said, that these sanctions won't work. And here's where it gets even worse for sanctions. Because, yeah, there's this black market and it's a little convoluted and it's a slow process as a result of relying on reputation and people and you can't cross the borders with the payment, etc. Here's where it gets complicated for sanctions beyond that. Because China has recognized the issues with sanctions as well, and they also have created their own sort of payment system that allows them to bypass the sanctions and not be restricted inside of borders. Need to make payments across the border? Well, this is where cross-border interbank payment system comes in, CIPS, C-I-P-S. And CIPS bypasses SWIFT by basically allowing banks to send payment messages that wind up settling those with the yuan currency instead of US dollars, literally set up to oppose US dollars. So there are two different methods primarily in which these countries can bypass the sanctions. One because of China and one ironically because of India. Hawala handles the informal cash side of things, and CIPS handles the formal banking side for countries facing sanction pressure. It's two different methods, both can be used and both work. This is the actual problem with that. And then beyond that, this is where it also gets really tricky for everything and why, again, I am outright stating that these sanctions won't work. Because not only is there Hawala and CIPS, but then there's also the transportation method of these goods. We're looking for flagged carriers, essentially, under the Iranian flag or subsequently any country that chooses to continue helping Iran. So China flagged vessels, Iran flagged vessels, we're on the lookout for those cargo ships, those oil tankers, etc. This is where it gets even trickier for America to enforce the sanctions. And again, why Scott Bessent was essentially admitting defeat even in the speech where he's announcing economic D-Day. with the use of sanctions, because there's a shadow fleet that literally exists, and it's Iran's shadow fleet, and it's 350 naval vessels strong. 350 of them. And the shadow fleet essentially operates in a technically internationally illegal way. They will turn off their transponders. They operate in many ways out of the Strait of Malacca and in Malaysian countries. They turn off their transponders so they can no longer be tracked. And while their transponders are turned off, they reflag the vessel to disguise it. Now all of a sudden it looks like a Malaysian vessel. It's representing the Malaysian flag instead of the Iranian flag. And so the United States is not privy to this, or we can't prove it, or we're not focused on it. So we can't impose the sanction on the goods. On board on that vessel, they'll even do things like dilute/blend the oil differently, even so that they can deceive everybody involved in regards to it. This all happens, and then they run the ship up that appears to not be an Iranian vessel, filled with their own goods to either import or export, depending, and we're none the wiser to it. And again, the problem is, how do you enforce this or prevent this when they're using black markets to make payments, when China has created its own opposition to SWIFT called SIPS that allows them to run through banks and use the yuan currency, and when all these other countries are perfectly, what's the word I'm looking for here? Content to be complicit in all of this, knowing that this is so hard to buckle down on, then these sanctions just outright aren't going to work. And this is what I've been explaining and basically talking about. The sanctions aren't going to work for a whole host of reasons. Now, take a look at this tweet right here as well. This was put out, and I'm not saying that this is, perfectly accurate information, but the Hormuz letter on Twitter is a good follow. And this was put out just a couple of hours ago. And it says, Iran says that all of its trading partners have privately told Iran that they will ignore Trump and Bessent's Operation Economic Outcast. Per Iran's Ghalibaf, that's Mohammad Ghalibaf, one of the prime ministers, I believe he's not the prime minister, he's one of the speakers of parliament, I believe, for Iran, as well as a senior Iranian source in Tehran familiar with the matter. Iran's trading partners, both in the media and through messages sent to us, have made it clear that they don't take these statements into account anywhere, Ghalibaf said. Americans know that no one buys their bombast. The United States is not in an economic position to further restrict its relations with other countries. And again, which country is really being referenced there? That would be China. That would be China. We are sadly just entirely too dependent on China. But here's the deal with this, and this is where I wanted to take this a step further, because most channels aren't even talking about this in the way that I just did, which is again why you should subscribe right now for information like this. Turn on post notifications when you do, so you're notified every time I go live. And you should of course also like the stream right now. That's free to do. You cheap goyim scum down in the chats there. You guys are poor. You can't afford to pay your super chat tariffs. You can't send me money for the pearls I'm throwing your way, you swine. But the least you could do is like the stream. It's free and it really does support the channel quite a bit. It signal boosts this channel out in the YouTube algorithm so that more people can stumble across it. So if you're appreciating this information, like the stream at the very least. But what I really wanted to get into with all of this is this whole sanction warfare. There's two main thoughts that I had here when it comes to all of this Iran war, how far it's been dragged out by the Trump administration with still no end in sight, with a new tactic that seems fresh and is being sold to the American people like it will work, when in all honesty, of course, it's not going to work. And it's not only going to fail, but it's actually going to harm the United States more in the long run, both economically and diplomatically going forward in the future. It's going to harm our global reserve currency, everything. It undermines everything. And in some ways, it risks the United States being exposed even more than we already have been throughout the course of this Iran war. We've been exposed already as being a country that is behind in drone warfare, behind in modern warfare, and a large, powerful nation with a large, powerful military and these massive naval vessels that have been rendered almost useless in the Persian Gulf region because of $50,000 drones and $200,000 ballistic missiles. We've already been exposed there. The sanctions are now exposing the weakening value of the US dollar and the weakening might of the United States as the world's global hegemon, able to enforce the sanctions and impose them. This is now exposing us in that regard as well, or potentially going to do that. Time will tell. But why is all of this happening, really? And that's really what I was thinking about all day long after listening to Scott Bessent's speech and going to work, etc. Why? Why is this happening? Why is this going on so long? Because this is what Scott Bessent had to say, by the way, in regards to all of this when it comes to these countries that are going to refuse to abide by them. Take a listen to this, actually, before I expand on this further.
For decades, this regime has drawn strength from a calculus that regards Iranian retaliation as certain and American enforcement as negotiable. Under President Trump, that era is over. To the ordinary soldiers supporting this regime, as more and more of your paychecks stop or are supposedly just delayed, ask whether your commanders are leading your country to triumph or to ruin. And recall that the Berlin Wall fell when ordinary soldiers decided not to shoot at their own people.
So very clearly, he's using a Berlin Wall reference, and it's sort of a geopolitical game being played here, meant to be weaponized against the Iranian regime, because reports have come in suggesting that, of course, the IRGC right now is not being funded anymore as a result of Iran's economy definitely taking a hit, something that I've never pretended wasn't the case on this channel and openly have stated from the start. Iran is absolutely suffering as a result of this war. I've always just gone on to cite the fact that they are a nation of Muslim zealots dedicated to their now holy war, basically, against the United States after having been attacked by us unprovoked back on February 28th, where we saw a school of theirs be blown to bits, 140 injuries / deaths of their own school children, their entire government destroyed, their religious leader, comparable to the Pope, be literally killed at the advanced age of 80-something years old. Like, they're angry. And they're so angry that I don't believe that it will matter that the IRGC can't receive their pay. We're banking on essentially crushing their economy even more so and forcing the regime to crumble from within. If the IRGC gets fed up enough with not getting paid, they may turn on the Iranian government and create the fracture and divide that the Trump administration tried to sell us was a possibility all the way back in April, which at that time on this channel I of course set the record straight and said, no it isn't, that's not happening. And fast forward from April to now, and it's been very clear that not only was that not happening, but like I said back in April, they're more unified than ever right now. Money could cause a problem, potentially. It is foreseeable. But the bigger picture in all of this is what I wanted to discuss here. Will this strategy work? I doubt it. I don't think so. I think Iran will get infinitely more hurt as a result of this in the next several different weeks, but Iran has made threats of their own as well, and they are fully prepared to enact those threats to make sure we feel economic pain too. If these sanctions last for another 2 or 3 weeks, we will be approaching the deadline that Iran set out for President Donald Trump just about 5 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, where they made their public statement about how if Trump doesn't end this war, pull our soldiers out of the region, acknowledge their sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, then they have vowed also, and they've also referenced that if the sanctions get applied especially, they will start targeting U.S. American interests in the Middle East, soft targets, infrastructure, economic interests. They stated they've been deliberately only targeting military targets as a result, and now they have the economic targets lined up, the soft infrastructure targets. This will hurt both the United States and our allies whose countries are housing these targets. So their deadline is coming up too, and this is going to be one of the ways that they counter this. Iran has demonstrated that their policy essentially is one of a scorched earth policy. We hurt them, they do their best to make sure they hurt us back equally, if not more so. So we need to be on the lookout for that. And in fact, in truth, I think I had this pulled up right here. Yeah, in truth, we've already sort of gotten word of this today. I'm going to show this real fast. I was going to save this for the end, but another oil tanker has been disabled, struck by Iran, by the IRGC, presumably, right off the coast of Oman. There's a strike straight to the oil tanker's engine room. UK MTO logged the attack and placed it at just about 9 nautical miles northeast of the tip of Oman there. So the crew are all reported safe, but it's being investigated currently, and it's very clear that Iran did this again today, and they've been doing this. So they're going to retaliate first and foremost, and they're going to do so in a way that continues to harm the United States and all of our allies. But the bigger picture, why this war is going on, I have two main thoughts on this. First and foremost, President Donald Trump, I'm trying to decide which avenue I want to go down first here. I think I'm going to go down this one first. I hypothesized several weeks ago on this channel that I had a feeling the tactics on display by President Donald Trump were tactics that demonstrated to me a president who had no desire for real peace. And I stated for the record, not to be somebody that criticizes our leader and then glazes Iran. I stated for the record at that time that Iran doesn't want peace either. There is really no side of this war that actually wants peace. And now Trump is desperate for peace, not because he really wants it, but in some ways he's desperate for it because of the effects that will be felt now on our U.S. economy that are jeopardizing his legacy as president. But before then, he didn't really want it. And this was what my analysis was when the talks of the Memorandum of Understanding were coming about, when the documents of the MOU were being formed. Something else I predicted would happen, by the way, right here on this channel. Again, why you should subscribe and like the show. I literally said this would all result with JCPOA 2.0. I was right. And then the MOU was signed. And then Trump broke it multiple times, and it's disintegrated and been cast aside. But I said at that time, these retaliatory strikes by the U.S. while he's signing peace documents and talking about ceasefires, this is not indicative of a president that wants peace with Iran, but rather a president that is feigning to want peace in order to prolong this war. And for what reason would that have been? Well, I mentioned at the time what became reality. Our munitions were running low. We were seeking to restock them the best that we could. And the ceasefires were really just momentary pauses rather than ceasefires earnestly being used to pursue peace. They were basically the ability for us to catch our breath, to try to restock the best we could before round 2 and round 3 and round 4. Ceasefires became these little minute and a half rest periods like a boxing ring. Beat the fuck out of each other for 3 minutes, take a 60-second, 90-second rest in the corner on your stool. That's what the ceasefires were becoming. That is not indicative of anybody wanting peace there. Moreover, the broader stroke picture I was trying to paint in my analysis back then too was that President Donald Trump, though he doesn't seem to care all that much about the polls or even about the midterms that much, will still be affected by them. And now more than ever, he's going public and he's doing these campaigns talking about if the midterms go blue, he'll be impeached. Now we're seeing he does care, but he doesn't care enough to stop the war, which will ultimately be the reason why midterms go blue. Something else I've predicted on this channel, and it's only a matter of time before that is proven correct. I am of the belief that the House is absolutely going blue, and very likely the Senate will too. The Senate's it's a bit of a coin toss, but if I had to bet on it now, I would say the Senate goes blue barely, but does go blue. There's definitely a chance it doesn't. But if that happens, yeah, he gets impeached. Trump is concerned. And so as a result, what we are seeing is this constant gaslighting for the sake of the markets, for the oil markets, for everything else, the stock market, so that panic is not induced. You find out our markets are fake enough to basically respond. The fear index is a real thing, right? The fear index exists for a reason. And so for the sake of the markets and the investors, Trump has perpetually been promising, no, they want peace. We have a peace deal. It's almost done. They want peace. We've destroyed them. We've annihilated them. This gaslights the entire American public in every single way that Trump wants and needs us to be gaslit. It gaslights the media into reporting sensational news that isn't true but sounds good, which gaslights the American public into not, perhaps at least, demonizing this war as much as they otherwise would. It gaslights the markets and the investors into remaining more optimistic than they should be, which allows for the markets to limp on in only a damaged state rather than one of a collapsed state. And all of this is being done, in my opinion, to sort of limp across the midterm elections finish line. Trump needs the midterm elections out of the way. Even if he doesn't care about them as much as he should, and certainly doesn't care enough about them to end the war now, rather than risk losing them over the war, he still, in his mind, no doubt recognizes and has been receiving absolutely at this point phone calls from all kinds of GOP House of Representatives members and senators basically asking him to do something about the war because they'll know. They're the ones that will be replaced after all if this Iran war is as unpopular with the American people as the polls say it is. So they're calling Trump, they're hounding him. We're going to get killed in the midterms because of this Iran war. You got to do something. Well, that's what makes the midterms a problem for Trump. And as a result of him not wanting to face impeachment trials, possibly from the Democrats after the midterms, etc., Trump is looking for any way to sort of keep the Iran war in limbo. We're not really bombing them anymore. There are no troops on the ground. There's not gunshots taking place. Rockets are still being launched by Iran at oil tankers, but they're not our ships. There have been no deaths in many, many, many weeks now. There has been an upgrade in the casualty number recently, several hundred more added on, but no deaths in many, many weeks. We're not dropping a nuke on Iran and turning ourselves into a global pariah. And the tit-for-tat strikes have really come to an end. The grim reality is, of course, we can't really do those anymore. Our munitions are running out, etc. But it does look better, at least to Americans, and doesn't make the American people as stressed, which is good for midterms. So that's not happening, and we're in limbo because, in addition to that, Trump may want peace for the midterm sake and for his legacy's sake, but Iran won't provide it to him. And Trump, if he had his way, would find a way to conquer Iran, defeat them, to obtain victory for the sake of his presidential legacy. Trump is desperately looking for a strategic victory, and Iran is denying that to him. Iran doesn't want peace because they despise Trump now. They despise America. They want to actively ruin his legacy, and they've publicly stated that that is one of their main goals. Going so far as recently to say that if Trump won't surrender to them and abide by the Memorandum of Understanding and withdraw from the Persian Gulf, then they'll just keep the Strait of Hormuz shut down until 2029 when there's a new president being sworn in. They're perfectly content for that. In fact, in some ways, I believe Iran wants this war to go on more than any other country, even more than Israel, who's the third element in play here. Of course, Israel wants the United States perpetually involved in the Middle East because they feel safer when we're there, although they shouldn't at this point because we're running out of the ability to defend them anyway. And we've proven that we can't really attack as efficiently for them as they want. So we're not even that useful of a Shabbos Goy to them. But they want us in the region. And it only serves Israel's benefit. It only serves their interests more the longer we stay. Because Iran is hurting from this. So the more Iran hurts, the safer Israel feels. So Israel wants the war, Iran wants the war, and Trump may be desperate for peace, but he won't accept peace on their terms. So that only leaves him with the option of wanting war. But Trump can't fully prosecute this war right now with midterm elections being less than 70 days away now, is it? We're closing in on the 2-month mark. So boots on the ground is political poison. You want to drive a nail into the heart of the GOP proverbially? Go boots on the ground in the next 3 or 4 weeks. You'll definitely make sure the Senate goes blue in doing so, along with the House. So that's what's happening. Trump is limping across the midterm election finish line, and that's what I believe is the real goal, because what will happen after the midterms, even if they go blue, that doesn't take effect until January of 2027. So midterms happen in November. That gives Trump a solid 45, 50, 50, 60 days, possibly even, to fully prosecute an Iran war or go way harder on them, go out with a bang, grand finale status before January hits and Democrats take control, and then they can start possibly putting the brakes on this Trump administration. So that is what I believe is on the horizon, and that is why Trump has to continually gaslight with all of this. He's doing so because if he outright promises publicly, if you vote Republican in November, I won't get impeached, and then the next day, I am sending 50,000 ground forces in to Iran, boots on the ground. We will take Larak Island, Keshem Island, Karg Island even, and many more will go right up the coastline of Iran in a 5-mile perimeter, and then we will send the Navy in. If he does that, that's a for sure loss. So that's all at play right now. And then there's Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's incentivized to keep this war going personally, because if it ends and Israel feels safe enough to host elections and he gets replaced, he's wanted for international war crimes, even by his own country. So there's a lot at stake in all of this, and that's one of the incentives for this war to go on. And that's one of the main reasons why I believe it's playing out this way. This economic sanction game is incredibly slow. The Trump blockade, incredibly slow. These methods work, but they're increasingly hard to enforce, and they don't work fast, and they don't solve anything long term. That's been the problem with both of them. The Trump blockade works. It doesn't work perfectly. Ships slip in and out. But it works, and it does choke off the strait more so, which chokes off Iran's economy. And sanctions work. Some countries will abide by them. This will hurt Iran. But it doesn't work quickly. And despite that, the problem is both of these things, the blockade and the sanctions, demonstrate action being taken, so it doesn't make Trump look as bad. He can say, well, we're defeating Iran, we just need more time. The sanctions are working. The blockade is working. And that's the justification for it all. And it's not violent. The blockade is not actively being fired upon, and the sanctions are purely economic. So that's what I see. Now, God forbid, and I hate to say that as a conservative, it pains me to say that even, but God forbid, if midterms go red, well, Trump now he can floor it. If midterms go red, the next day for sure we're seeing massive military action take place in Iran. There'd be no reason to even wait. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, what I also really wanted to get into here is the other reason why this is all playing out this way. The sanctions are really a big factor. It's really sort of a big tell-all in all of this. And I've dedicated other episodes to how there is a new world order forming in the world right now. A new world order is forming. Lines are being drawn and redrawn and erased and redrawn. Alliances are shifting, interests are changing, the global economy is being affected. And again, this is not something that I've heard anybody talk about here, but it all really goes back to, in my head, this kept on playing in my head on repeat here after Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's little speech there about the sanctions and targeting countries that support Iran. It's like immediately just understand that is what's taking place. These lines are being redrawn, and this points to something major taking place. It all really goes back to Trump's speech right here, actually. This is what I was reminded of, his statements from a little while back here. Take a listen to this. He's talking about the G7 predominantly. And take a listen to what Trump says. And I always knew that this video, this was going to be useful. So I actually had this saved. Take a listen.
But as you do fly back on Air Force One, you feel like this was a success.
A fantastic success. The relationship, look, we're two very powerful countries. I call it the G2. There's nobody comes close. We are more powerful than China. We were heading in the wrong direction. We were going to be a failed nation. We were doubling our welfare, and nobody was investing here. We have $18 trillion coming in. I mean, I was congratulated by President Xi in front of both groups he said, I've never seen anything like it. I like him, he likes me. That's a good thing. You know, you have two very powerful nuclear nations, and having good relations at the top is very important. We've known each other for 11 years now. You know, we've been dealing with each other for a long time.
And you'll have him to the White House in September.
He's going to be coming in September or November, I don't know, sometime, but I think they've set a date, September 24th, something like that. And it'll be an honor. We're going to do a fantastic job, just like they did here.
When he said that, I did an episode or a video on this because of how significant what he was saying was and how little people actually grasp that. Now, the G7 is essentially the world's top leading 7 nations. It consists of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the United Kingdom, along with the United States, of course. And the European Union collectively as a whole is a non-enumerated member. The G7, they hold these conferences, and President Donald Trump was referencing the G7 and shifting from what he called the G7, or what is called the G7, I should say. He didn't call it that. He was shifting to what he says he's now calling the G2. That is so significant because in doing so, he was essentially recognizing China as a key player in the world. The G2, he calls it, between China and the United States. Just understand the significance of that. Trump, in that speech, was essentially openly acknowledging how radically the world is transforming economically and from a power standpoint. To acknowledge that really it all boils down to what he says, not a G7 but a G2, is to acknowledge that the world is truly approaching an era where it is becoming a bipolar world order. It's not unipolar, and Trump was almost admitting that there. Unipolar is how America chooses to view it. We are the world power. To say it's a G2 and to then subsequently admit that and imply it's a bipolar world, China is a competitor to us, is to acknowledge that ultimately the world is boiling down to which side you're on. And that's the lens that I view a lot of all of this taking place in. Just take the G7, for instance. Canada, France, Italy, Japan, the UK, and Germany. Let's just look at those countries and understand that they're all adopting different stances. Canada is attempting to become more friendly to China. And now Trump is re-engaging in a tariff war with Canada, which Mark Carney has openly stated is going to drive Canada further into the hands of China. Now, Canada, I don't care what people say about this. Maybe in the short term, Canada can cause us economic pain. And yes, it's embarrassing for President Donald Trump to be stood up by Canada. We now have Ontario Premier Doug Ford threatening to cut off electricity to all of the northern states in America. That also runs down the Mississippi River to some degree. They'll have some effect there. And Mark Carney, he's going to want to buy electric vehicles from China, which will undermine our automobiles. And, he wants to basically sell more to China. Okay, fine. China doesn't buy shit. China produces, and China doesn't buy hardly anything from Canada. Canada is nearly totally dependent on us, like I said on the last episode. And there's not a long enough of a time frame for Canada to diverge or really pull themselves off of our systems. They're too entrenched with the U.S. economy. They need us far more than we need them. And people can argue that all day, but we have maple syrup in Vermont. We have plenty of lumber all across the world. We can do our own steel to some degree. We just don't need them that much. They have the potash, etc. And oh boy, are they going to cut us off from alcohol or tariff our alcohol or whatever. Yes, it's a problem. No, this is not the right time for Trump to be waging this tariff war. It's a foolish time for him to be doing this. But all of that rant is to say Canada is inconsequential to the United States. And even then, you look at Canada and again recognize they are actively trying to make a way to deal more with China. They want to increase relations with China. The line in the sand is being drawn, and both sides are asking which side do you fall on. That's why it's important to look at this. Now, France, Emmanuel Macron stood up at the World Economic Forum and made similar statements. He said, we want to increase our ties with China, he says. He said that last year. Germany has taken a hard-line stance against China. So unlike France and Canada, Germany is starting to treat China as more of an enemy, actually. Italy, not really sure where they fall. She's an interesting one over there. Prime Minister, what's her name? She's an interesting one, and I'm not really sure where Italy falls. I don't really see them as being super pro-China. And Japan, of course, has a long history with China that is interesting. Now, the United Kingdom, they're also looking to deepen their ties with China, including allowing a Chinese embassy to be built next door to one of their national security buildings. All of this is to say, this war is being drawn out. Trump calls it a G2 now, bipolar world order. The sanctions themselves and the secondary sanctions are furthering, they're further deepening the line and the demand to pick a side. In combination with what's happening in the Middle East with Iran, we are flustering the global economy because of this war. It's straining a lot of our allies' global economies, which is definitely angering them. They're going to sour on us more, and they're ultimately going to pick a side. And that's what we're seeing, and that's really how you have to look at this. There's only two countries that matter right now, China and the United States. Which side are which countries on? Japan is going to be on our side for the most part, but they're angry with us. We had to bail out their currency recently, and it barely worked. In fact, it's not even working. And Japan is next door to China. They want to rely on us. They need to rely on us more, but are we reliable? If we do stuff like this that crushes their currency, and if we pull our defense systems and aircraft carriers out of the Indo-Pacific, where we keep an eye on North Korea and China, and we move it into the Middle East at the request of Israel? Are we even that useful to them? These are the questions that are going to be asked. And these are the kind of things that most people are not going to understand, just how significant this is. Beyond that, the real side also that's forming, the undertone in all of this that's becoming more of a prevalent overtone is, of course, Israel. Israel is also becoming a massive problem here, and we're seeing a lot of countries also take a firmer stance against Israel, who America is cucked to. And so the undertone being Israel is one of the largest problems as well. Italy is becoming more hostile, way more hostile to Israel. So is Spain. So is Mexico. I believe Prime Minister Mark Carney made a statement against Israel's actions in Gaza. I believe at the time Keir Starmer did something similar over in the UK. And I believe France did too, for the record. And then, of course, do I even need to bring up Germany? Probably not. But that's what's taking place here. All of this is shifting, and that's how these countries are going to view it. They're going to view it through the very obvious lens that the United States very clearly, when it comes to foreign interests, chooses Israel's demands and needs over all others. That has been on full display throughout the course of this war. Again, the last U.S. aircraft carrier left the Indo-Pacific region to head to the Persian Gulf because the USS Abraham Lincoln was becoming a PR nightmare in the region. We pulled out the last aircraft carrier from the Indo-Pacific. We just gave it up, essentially. We pulled the THAAD systems out to move them to the Middle East. And those defend our Persian Gulf allies, but Israel. So that's how I'm viewing this. That's how I'm watching this. And it is so important. There are so many countries making their choices now. And it's not to say they're making firm choices either. This is not, I'm on China's side and I'm against the United States. This is the beginnings of that. It's the sly little, well, we work with them. Why not work with China too? It's kind of that. France says, well, we just want to deepen our ties with China, strengthen our relationship, they call it. That's the beginning of all of this, as they recognize this. BRICS exists. They're trying to undermine our global currency. I just spent the better part of an hour describing how they do that. And these countries are all going to hedge their bets. Now, beyond that, I want to take it one step further here. Because some analysts might say that it's turning into a bipolar world. It's sort of an easy read with President Donald Trump sitting there and basically saying it's the G2. Here's the other deal with this. In some ways, the lines are being drawn and they're very complicated because of what we're also seeing take place in the regional Middle East. The trilateral Mecca Defense Pact now. Pakistan, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. This is also shifting things. And I actually see a potential where, while many people might tell you it's becoming a bipolar world order between China and the United States, I see a potential world where it's a tripolar world order. If some of those rumors come true that I reported on when it comes to Mecca NATO, we call it, Pakistan, the nuclear power, Saudi Arabia, the oil-rich power, and Turkey, the military might, if these countries form together and Greater Turkey becomes a project to combat Greater Israel, and they wind up recognizing and fully openly acknowledging the true purpose of the Mecca NATO, which is not purely meant to be a defensive pact, it's meant to be a defensive pact against Israel. They are doing it now because people will piece together and assume that it's being done because of the Iran war and Iran being hostile to all of their neighboring Persian Gulf nations and neighbors. There's some truth to that, but the Mecca NATO is being formed to defend against Israel. And as a result of that, there are going to be several other nations in the Middle East that will want to join that down the line when they inevitably come to the reality that America is just not powerful in the Middle East anymore, can't project power that well anymore. Our military peaked 30, 40 years ago. It's on the decline, and we'll have to leave the region. So in that recognition, Egypt will want to join. Qatar will want to join. And there's rumors that Iran was already invited to join. If that happens, that is quite the Middle East power. And if Egypt joins with Iran, just understand what that means. They now control the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, which gives access from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean, and they control the Strait of Hormuz and Persian Gulf. They now control the literal artery that is the Middle East, and that could set them up to collectively, sort of like a European Union type vibe, in a way, collectively become a third power player collectively in the world. So it's China, the United States, and this Mecca NATO, however this turns out. All while, we'll see what happens, but all while Turkey keeps their membership in regular NATO, which further complicates things. So that's what I see on the horizon there. I'm not really sure how. I'm not predicting anything with that. It's a wait and see thing, but what's also really interesting in such times is we won't have to wait and see all that long. Things are moving quickly, very quickly. And these sanctions in some ways are going to speed it up. Those sanctions are slow. We're going to see things sped up. We're going to see decisions be made even more determinately so. So that's what I see. You know, a tripolar world order, possibly. The recognition of the bipolar world order makes way for that in some ways. And the sanction plan, not going to work. Trump limping across the midterm election finish line to keep this war going so that after the elections he can prosecute it further and try to claim some sort of strategic victory before January. It's just so much. There is so much on the playing out right now, but that's what I wanted to go live and talk about here. If you appreciated that, please be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Double tap your phone screens, hit the thumbs up button. It's free to do, and it does encourage YouTube's algorithm to push this show out to more people who need to see this. Also, subscribe if you enjoyed that. Turn on post notifications so you're notified every time I go live, which is most nights of the week. We've been discussing geopolitics quite a bit on this channel. I am a conservative. I do discuss a lot of social things, and that's where a lot of my geopolitical viewers sometimes get angry and unsubscribe. I don't care. I don't take it personally. Just be aware I am a conservative. I'm just not a MAGA cultist, so I freely criticize President Donald Trump as anybody should be doing right now. And I've been discussing a lot of geopolitics lately. And here's the deal with that, by the way, and I wanted to actually say this. Some of my viewers, they want to discuss about the domestic issues. They want to discuss more about that in America, the issues with immigration and everything that I'm aligned with them on and definitely want to talk about and I'm always looking to discuss. Here's a reality for you, though, and this is something I wanted to say. One of the inherent problems of having these leaders in positions of power that are Zionists and they're at the service of Israel's interest, which always diverts their attention away from the American public. Our cost of living has gotten worse under Trump, not better. And it didn't have to be this way. Our gas has increased in price. We're paying more for gas, more for food. The housing market is abysmal and might be on the verge of crashing, by the way. Nothing has gotten better under President Donald Trump economically here in America. Inflation is going up once again, and it is now baked into what will be an inevitable recession here in America, probably hitting later this year or early next year. The problem is Israel and their foreign influence in our politics distracting our president and our leaders from serving we the people domestically. And here's the real shame in all of this. Trump is now so distracted with this Iran war that he's not focused on us. And even when he's asked about it, you're going to hear this soundbite played in the coming weeks. Sir, how often do you take the financial situation of the average American into account before starting things like the Iran war? Never. I never even think about it. Honestly, it's not even a thought. Iran cannot have a nuke. That's not a direct quote, but that's literally basically what he said. That's going to be clipped and used on the midterms against the GOP. That's the real shame here, because Trump's opportunity, his window of opportunity to actually give the Republicans a good name and deliver on what he promised, is essentially closing. It's done. We are now almost 2 months away from midterm elections, and as a result of this war, which simultaneously has almost all of Trump's attention and also has been the worst possible thing for Trump and is going disastrously, which ironically is going to make everything worse for the Republicans. He's put all of his attention into the Iran war, and it's going terrible. He's literally failing. He looks like a buffoon. His legacy's being destroyed. America's being humiliated in all of this. And the Republican Party is going to pay a massive price as a result of that. They're going to lose in the midterms, either the House or the Senate. There's a good chance they lose the Senate. Alaska was an early indicator of that, by the way, just the other week in their primaries. It went to a Democrat over 2 Republicans. Understand what that means. Trump's already distracted with foreign affairs in the first 2 years of his presidential term, his second term. Those are the 2 years where the American people collectively decided to give him power by giving him the executive and turning the House and the Senate red. Trump has control of the Supreme Court technically. They do side against him a lot, but it is a predominantly red Supreme Court. The Senate's been red. The House of Representatives has been red. He has had basically permission to do whatever he wants to fulfill his campaign promises. And along comes Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, and they say, not so fast. Back to the Middle East you go, goy. Miriam Adelson gave you $240 million, goy. Remember that? So the Epstein files, you're not releasing those. Too many Jews in them. And Miriam Adelson gave you the money to start this war. Go fucking start it. And once you start the war, all of your attention goes there. So in the first 2 years of Trump's term, where he basically had the option to get his campaign promises done and make the economy better and give the Republicans massive momentum going into the midterms and give them the best shot of retaining power, he chose instead to blow it all on foreign affairs and on the Middle East. Here's the downside to that. Now for sure the Republicans lose this November. They for sure lose. And when that happens, now there goes the opportunity for Trump to accomplish anything domestically in America. He had the opportunity and willfully gave it up. Now, after midterms, even if he wants to accomplish anything domestically, his hands will be tied by Democrats who will resist every effort that he puts forth when it comes to immigration or the economy or any of it. Because the Democrats don't care what good or bad policy is. They only care about appearances. Politics is a game of perception, and perception is reality. The Democrats will only care about being seen opposing Trump for being able to call upon that in 2028's elections to be able to say, we stopped Trump. It won't matter what that is. They'll stop no tax on tips if it means being able to say we stopped Trump. So anything good and everything bad, thankfully in that regard at least, and why I actually do want midterms to go blue even as a conservative. Yes, I do. I literally fucking want this administration halted, because if midterms go red, we're getting more of the Iran war and none of the rest of the Epstein files and total corruption. And he betrayed MAGA, we're going to betray him now. I'll be voting Democrat in the midterms this year. I'll be voting Democrat. Fuck this GOP. This Zionist-infested GOP. Fuck them. But the shame in all of it is, it didn't have to be this way. If he would have just focused on the campaign promises, the economy would have been better. Republicans would have had an honest chance at maintaining power in the midterms. And then he could have continued on in the next 2 years focusing on Americans. Instead, he's focused on foreign affairs in the first 2 years. And now after midterms, he'll have no opportunity to focus on domestic issues. And what will a president do like Trump, who's 80 years old and focused on dying with a good legacy? He'll do what he thinks he can do, and he'll go where he has any remaining power left, which won't be domestic issues because the Democrats will control the House and or the Senate. It will be foreign affairs as the commander-in-chief. That is where Trump will be able to exert some power over the Democrats still, and they won't be able to stop him as much, so he'll have to go all in on that. We'll be getting more tariff wars, trade wars, etc. And I even like tariffs. It's just Trump didn't implement them correctly. And now he's ruining the actual reputation, I guess you could say, or opinions of people on tariffs. He'll do the tariffs. He'll do the trade wars. He'll do anything possible. He'll try to proctor or prosecute these forever wars and claim that they're conflicts and excursions, and the Democrats will have to move towards impeachment. And then the question, of course, is, will they move towards impeachment when Israel has the goal of this war going on? Will the Democrats impeach Trump? Will Israel allow that and risk J.D. Vance coming in, a millennial technically, who is Middle East fatigued and has been outspoken against this war? And 80% of Congress is purchased by Israel, which includes the vast majority of Democrats in that as well. So there's a lot of questions that remain to be seen, but that's the real shame in all of this. The real shame with the benefit of hindsight is just looking at it and understanding Trump had a chance to actually fix or begin fixing America in a way that could set up the Republicans to win for the next 10, 15, or 20 years. And instead, he sold it all out for Israel to start a war that he then focused on for the entirety of 2026, which has now cost the GOP in the midterms, which will then subsequently prevent Trump from focusing and fixing anything domestically going forward beyond that. That's what's happening. That's what's happening, and like with anything, time will prove me wise on that too. It always does. Be sure to subscribe to American Advocates right now, you useless goyim. You absolutely useless goyim scum. You're not useful to me in any other way unless you subscribe. Turn on post notifications and like the stream right now. Double tap your phone screens. It's free to do, and it encourages YouTube's algorithm to push this show out to more people who need to see this. Oh, do I even want to look at the chat? Look at what is... Look at what's going on in this. What is happening in the vertical? Now, the horizontal, and be aware I simulcast. So if you're watching on your phone, I'm streaming to the YouTube Shorts vertical feed. But if you want to watch on a TV or a tablet or a computer, I also stream on the horizontal feed. You can see both of those streams happening at the same time on my channel and pick which one is the best format for you. The horizontal chat never gets the views as much because YouTube doesn't push out my horizontal content as much. It somehow classifies me, I guess, as a vertical content producer. I kid you not. The algorithm's ridiculous. But the horizontal stream always has like the smart people in it, like TC. TC, he's a decent guy. TC says, I'm fairly well read on this topic and must say you are doing a really good job describing the current situation. I really enjoyed your description of how this affects the U.S. currency. Thank you, TC. I appreciate that. To be honest with you, I'll be straight up with you. There is so much, when it comes to the global economy, there is so much I know, but even more so stuff I don't know. And there are probably, truthfully, are better. I won't, in a rare moment of true humility, I will say this. There are probably channels out there that are strictly financial channels that know a lot more about it than I do. The unfortunate reality is, and I suffer this for you guys. The unfortunate reality is those channels are always somehow hosted by an economist who's a very smart guy. They seem like nice, smart guys, some of them. But they also sound like the guy from the old Dry Eyes Visine commercial. Clear eyes, get clear eye, dry eyes, get clear eyes. Buy Visine today. It's like watching paint dry or a snail crawl across a sidewalk. Great information, not very charismatic or energetic. And I'm not saying I'm the most of those either, but I like to think I deliver it a lot better. And so I suffer through those channels for you. And that's, again, why you should subscribe right here. So I'll say that. Yeah, a lot more to learn. It's a very complex system, and you'll also understand. Here's the truth that I've come to understand when it comes to economics. Economics is really no different than the weather. Economists are really no different than forecasters. They're usually wrong. They're usually wrong, actually. They're like right about 30 to 40% of the time. They have an understanding, a very good understanding. But things are hard to predict. And in addition to that, the understanding that these economists have is flawed for a multitude of different reasons. So one economist will tell you one thing, another economist will tell you something different. And they're kind of just, you got to look at them as like weathermen, really smart weathermen. Like when they're right, they're very right. But when they're wrong, they're very wrong. So that's what's also tough about talking about it. Stop everything. We have a $5 super chat tariff from Phantom of Many Topics. You are a red-haired version of me, a Chinese-American GOP version of me who is upset with Trump. You know, the thing is, my hair's not actually red. I got to fix the saturation on my camera. My hair's actually like brown. I'm not actually a redhead. I do get slightly red hairs in my beard because I am Irish. I'm Irish and British and German. So I actually, when I grow my beard out long, there will be red hairs that come out of it. But I'm actually, I know this looks red, but it's a combination of my lighting. When you go live and you're doing a studio type thing, you have a lot of lighting. And then it's a saturation filter on the camera that I've adjusted to, produce the best quality. But in doing so, it's given my hair a red tint. I did realize that. But anyways, I appreciate the $5 super chat tariff, Phantom, and he says the Chinese-American GOP version. Yeah, who's upset with Trump? Yeah, very upset with Trump. Anybody who's paying attention should be upset with Trump, and just because I'm a conservative doesn't mean I'm not going to call it out. In fact, I've always been of the belief that if the party you voted for is doing something wrong, you should be calling that out way more. It's expected that you're not going to, if you're a Democrat, it's expected that you don't like Trump. If you're a Republican, it's not expected, and therefore it actually carries more weight when you say something. It's actually like a responsibility. It's called having standards, and it's really called not viewing politics like team sports. And by that I mean, I don't relate with leftists on anything, certainly not morally. But what I mean is, people who advocate for a third party are doing so without the understanding that, truthfully, the American people are the third party, and we're the largest, most predominant party. We're the party that matters. We're the party that the other two are supposed to cater to and represent. And if you place your vote on a Republican who then gets into office and breaks his promises, of course the Democrats are going to complain, but they've always been complaining about that. They're complaining about everything he does. It's the Republicans that should be speaking up and saying, wait a minute, what the fuck is this? I didn't vote for this. And you should be using your voice to apply pressure, if possible. And you can argue how possible that is when there's tons of foreign influence money funding these decisions and possible blackmail to incentivize that their agenda is fulfilled over the will of the people. But that being said, that doesn't change the fact that as we the people, it is our job to voice our dissatisfaction with our elected leaders. This is not the NFL. Republicans are not, the Miami Dolphins or the New York Giants or, the Panthers. The Republicans are a bunch of politicians. They're weaselly politicians. Same with the Democrats. They look like mice and rats because that's what they are, all of them. And they will find any way they can to hold on to power. But the whole point of the system is to grant them power and give them that privilege because they appeal to the people. And if they're not doing that, it's on you to call them out, especially if it's on the political side of the aisle you predominantly support. Dude, this vertical chat, guys, what do you like? God, this vertical chat is crazy. Like, none of you, so many people in the vertical chat, they think they're funny. They think they're funny. They think that they're original. Like they like they're so unpredictable and oh, that's so original. I've read all of these chats before. Actually, I haven't read this one from Compost Men. Hitler had hair like yours. Did he really? Did Hitler really have this? Did he have all this hair? Really? I didn't know that. Yeah, I certainly didn't see that in the black and white footages. Yeah. The Goyim deserve to be enslaved. The vertical chat always the horizontal chat is the white pill on my channel. I look at my horizontal live stream and the separate chat from that, and it's always the smart people. They have the patience to watch long form content. They're always well informed, and they leave really smart stuff. And then you just look at the vertical chat, and it's all of you dopamine addicted YouTube Shorts viewers who for some reason are literally on YouTube at 2 a.m. when you should be asleep getting ready to go to your goy job the next day and be a productive member of society. And you're doom scrolling on YouTube, and you stumble across this stream where I, your intellectually superior, am literally throwing you all kinds of pearls. I am casting these pearls out. And it's unfortunate that so many of them are landing at the feet of swine, like many of you in the chat. It is crazy. It is crazy. So people are like, is this Diddy? Actually, yes. Actually, yes. Biden printed more money than anyone. So far, give Trump some time. And I ranted on that when Biden did that too, by the way. Quantitative easing. What a fucking scam. What is a vertical chat? Marktopian. You're in it. You must obey Trump, says Ruggins. Great. You have the face of someone who can deliver a crazy statement in funny skits. Yes, I'm aware. I've been doing that my whole life. I've been saying things that... Never mind. I'm not even... Yeah, let's just say somehow I've always been the one that gets away with saying crazy things in public to people I barely know, and somehow they always find it funny, thankfully, and not like so offensive that they want to like shoot me. Bro, I'm so glad that there's someone out here putting out the real global effects that these actions have. There we go. A little bit of redemption for the vertical stream. Mark Cole. Appreciate that, man. So many people listen to these sensationalized or biased versions of what's really going on. You know, I am a sensationalized, biased type guy when it comes to social issues here in America. You know, tune into my stream about Lindsey Clancy or immigration issues, you know. But when it comes to geopolitics, it's just like, there's just the facts. There's conjecture and speculation, and then there's facts. And you kind of blend those together to do a geopolitical analysis. But the facts are important. It's like, this is just what's happening. It doesn't matter. And in some ways, it's almost endearing because like some people are mad at me exposing this stuff in the chat because they're American nationalists or they have pride in America and they don't want to admit certain realities. That's almost endearing in some ways. But also, we got to wake up. I appreciate where people are coming from sometimes on that, this notion that America is not a country in decline. I wish that were true, and I want to make sure that that's the truth for the future. But if we ignore reality and ignore the facts and we choose to not focus on geopolitics and how foreign affairs are handled in this nation, then we'll never restore America. We'll just keep voting for Zionist pig-influenced candidates who rise up and keep serving Israel over our interest and waging these fucking forever wars that benefit the military-industrial complex in Israel and nobody else. So you just got to call it out. It's just reality's reality, whether you like it or not. Oh, I think I'm going to leave it at that, though. For the love of God, the vertical chat. Let's see anything in the horizontal before I wind down here. Losing Canada has turned into a nightmare scenario. Yeah, I don't know about that. It's kind of the icing on the cake of all of this, where it's like even a country as pitiful as Canada is now telling Trump no. It's like, oh, brother. That's just how bad it is. But I don't think losing Canada is a nightmare. It's a nightmare for them. They don't realize it yet. China is probably building a drone fleet right now. We are out of interceptors. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they have their factories. We can't touch them. Hey, Double M, good to see you, man. Love to chat, AA. You damn sure do your homework, and I'm proud to be a subscriber. America first. Amen on that note. That's the note where we're going to choose to end it tonight on. So thank you to everybody who tuned in. Be sure to subscribe. Like I said, if you haven't already, it's not an option. You must subscribe. In fact, being here has already made sure that you're a subscriber. It's not a choice. You will be back, and you will learn when you come back. You're welcome. Be sure to share this channel with your even dumber friends so that one day they could be as smart as me too. Don't be selfish. And finally, it's not too late to leave a like on the stream right now. Double tap your phone screens if you're watching on your phone on the vertical feed, or find the thumbs up button and tap on it for me with your fat, disgusting thumbs. But other than that, glory to America, the best nation on earth by far. And it's not even close. And we will restore this country to glory. Just not with Trump, sadly. Glory to America. God bless the USA. And may God bless all of you as well. May God bless most of you as well. Let's be real. Some of you are not getting blessed by God in this lifetime or the next. That being said, have a great rest of your evening. Bye-bye.
There are too many minorities. Too many. At my water park. Somebody do something. Where did they all come from? Why can't they leave this land alone? And it's such a tragedy. Feel bad like dying. We look the other way too long. We've got to change our priorities and get all these minorities out of my water park.